give it like one more minute, but I think it looks like we've got most of the people we need here. All right. Let me get the chat open for myself. Thanks everyone for introducing yourself. So as I mentioned, my name is Allie Rippey. Thank you everybody for being here today. We're looking forward to seeing some of the best projects from this cohort. Just a couple announcements. I know we recently hit over 1,400 job placements, which is really exciting. And we're just wanting to hopefully get a couple more people on that list of people who have gotten into tech jobs after our program. Um, if you have any interest in getting connected with one of the presenters on here, particularly if it's for hiring, feel free to reach out to me via email. My name is Allie, and my email is allie@codeu.org, and that's ALLI. Um, Quickly, we may need some mentors for March. We're always looking for additional mentors for our upcoming cohorts. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. Um, and then this cohort started in May and wrapped up in December. So I don't have a count here. Let's see. We have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight presenters today. And they're all really great and did really well on their capstones. So the regions that we have represented today are Louisville and then a couple from our SOAR regions, different cities from around the greater part of Kentucky. And the pathways that we offered in this cohort were web development with JavaScript, data analysis with Python, and Google IT support, the professional certificate. We don't have any presenters from this one. A lot of those presenters have, or a lot of those participants have moved on to the cybersecurity course. And then we have the AI from the January cohort that wrapped after last demo day. Let's see. Each of our presentations will be about 5 to 6 minutes each. We will have a Q&A following each presentation. So if you have a question for a presenter, please throw it in the chat. We'll go over those. And if we don't have time to get to all the questions, we can always have you follow up with a presenter. Let's see. So, if you guys don't have any questions before we get started, I can go ahead and pass it off to Amanda Allred. She is in Louisville and she's going to be presenting her Skill It Up project.
Awesome. Hello. Thanks, Allie. As she said, my name is Amanda Allred, and I just completed the web development pathway with CodeU. And I did the project Skill It Up, which is a recipe website, which we'll get into here in a minute. Oop. All right, so a little bit about me. I am a full-time mom located in Louisville, and until my daughter was born, I had a career in the nonprofit sector as an informal educator, as a volunteer manager, and lastly, as a website coordinator, which is when I signed up for CodeU. I have a bachelor in studio art, so I love design and the flow of things and the way colors speak to people. And I love art, music, cooking, cats, all sorts of things. And my goal in life is to simplify things for others. Everything I've done, it kind of boils down to that. And I really wanted to embody that in this project. I chose Code U because I knew several people personally who were involved with the program in one way or another, and they had nothing but amazing things to say about it. And the more I learned about it, the more I saw what an invaluable resource it was to expand my personal and professional development and feed my love of lifelong learning. And it lived up to all of those things. My project Skill It Up, like I said, it is a recipe website. What I found with a lot of other recipe websites is they can be clunky, hard to follow. They're not always beginner friendly, and there can be a lot of steps that you have to go back and see, like, did I do this? Did I not do that? I really wanted to simplify that. So my project focused on having a very clean design with a recipe at the top of the page. It has tips and tricks that the community can submit, and I added checkboxes to be able to follow along when you're collecting ingredients and following the steps. With my project, I wanted it to appear best on mobile first. So mobile first design, I wanted it to have consistent branding and layout throughout the whole website so you always felt like you were in the same place. On the back end side of things, I created a server with Node.js and Express.js and built a custom API that allows users to add recipes, and those go into a JSON file that then get parsed out onto different pages and auto formatted. And then for user experience, I wanted it to be very easy to get around. I wanted each page to go straight to the recipe. And the recipes themselves, I wanted them to be very simple. So if someone is learning how to cook, they're really, really hard to mess up. So this is the home page of my website. I have it set up to have 3 random recipes generate at the top and 2 random tips. It's also fully responsive, including with the hamburger menu at the top and then the layout of the recipes on the page as well. And that's throughout the entire website. The recipes page has all the recipes that are input currently. And whenever you click on one, it brings you into the recipe. All of this has been parsed out from the JSON file. You can click through and mark off as you're cooking and following along. If there are any notes attached to it, those appear here as well as 2 random tips. If you want to just look through and see what the community has to offer, you can go to the tips and tricks page and you can search keywords. This searches specifically for that combination of letters. So if you see you search for egg, it pulled up veggies. That's something I'd want to address in the future, but for now, you're able to search through something you're wanting to learn about. This is the add a recipe page. I typed in all of the things for peanut butter and jelly sandwich, just short, sweet, and simple. That has been added to the list of recipes. And when you go in, you can see it's all been fully parsed out and laid out automatically on its recipe page. So I did run into challenges, as you do with any web development project. A lot of the tutorials and guides that I found were not designed for mobile first. So there was a lot of reverse engineering that I had to do. The biggest one that stuck out was the hamburger menu. That was a challenge, just having to repiece that code together. I also struggled to keep my CSS file clean. I actually redid the whole thing because it was getting clunky and cascading all wrong. So dry coding is very important. The data population on the pages, figuring out how to get it to parse out based on when the user hit the enter key so that each one was on its own line was a little bit of a hiccup that I had there. And then the searching tips, I was overthinking how to search through the content and having it toggle on and off rather than just be visible or not visible. And so after I stepped away, which is the challenge is, that really, really helped. So this project taught me when it comes to challenges, take a breath. There's a solution. It helps to rubber duck it or pseudocode out what you're trying to do. And that solved about 80% of my problems. I realized I skipped a step and then I would know what to Google. And I've learned along the way what resources to go to whenever trying to solve issues. And if that didn't work, sleeping on it or something this project really hammered home is use your resources and ask for guidance. There's so many communities out there that are excited to help with projects, and using that is important. And it reinforced some things about myself. I am a learner. I am a problem solver. I am nitpicky, as evidenced by my CSS file. And I can now say I am a programmer, having completed this program. If you'd like to contact me, my information is on the screen. And I'd like to thank you all so much for taking time to learn about my project today.
Great job, Amanda, and great application too. I really like that project.
Thank you.
We do want to know a little bit more. How have you been able to juggle being a new mother with learning about web development and creating this capstone project?
creatively. There were a lot of very creative contact naps with baby on me and the laptop over here on the side doing projects. And when I couldn't work on that, just absorbing as much content as I could on YouTube about web design was really helpful. But having something to put my brain to that wasn't baby related was amazing, and the late nights were all worth it for that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Next up, we have Allison Icy, who's also in the Louisville region. Allison, go ahead and show us your color playground.
Thank you so much, Allie, and good job, Amanda. Again, my name is Allison Eichste, and I'm based out of Louisville. And today I'll be presenting my capstone project called The Color Playground. So a little bit about me. My background is in psychology and foreign language learning. And I was looking to have a career change about a year ago. And this was around the same time that I had my first contact with coding. And I was really surprised to learn that my experience foreign language learning really lent itself to learning programming languages as well in a kind of surprising way. Um, so over this past year, I have been really excited to dive into HTML, CSS, JavaScript, as well as Python and a little bit of Django with CS50's web development with Python and JavaScript course. Um, I plan to continue my studies next year, actually moving to Spain for a one year long master's program in web and graphic design. But after that, I plan to move back to Louisville and continue my job search. So a little bit about the Color Playground. It's a fully responsive digital tool for artists and designers, or really anybody who's interested in learning more about color theory. I designed it using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, and Express.js, as well as I integrated a third-party API through Web AIM, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And I also used Adobe Illustrator to make the vector graphics, as you can see right here, for example. So I got the idea for the Color Playground while I was reading this book called Interaction of Color by an artist named Joseph Albers. And his teachings around color were pretty revolutionary for the time. He really focuses on how colors change based on your perception of them, based on a lot of factors, including the other colors that are around a specific color. And his teaching is very practical too. So this book is just full of exercises that the reader can do. And he recommends doing them with colored slips of paper. But as I was reading the book, I didn't have colored slips of paper lying around. So I did what anybody would do and got on Google and tried to find a digital tool, but I didn't find anything for free. So I wanted to make a digital tool that would allow the user to experiment with two of his most famous exercises. So here is a quick demonstration of the two exercises I decided to include. The first one is a challenge to make one color look like two colors. So when the page is loaded, a random color is generated for the two smaller squares, and the user can change the background of the two larger squares in order to try to make the two purples in this example look like different shades of purple. You can also refresh colors if you want to repeat the exercise. And going to exercise 2, it's basically the same thing, just reversed. So the two smaller squares are slightly different shades of the same color. And the goal is to make those look the same, or at least look more similar than before. And this one is a little bit harder than the first exercise. As you can see, I'm attempting it here. Another feature of my website is a tool for creating custom color palettes. And this can be really helpful for artists or designers when they're in the planning process to pick out different color combinations that they might like and save it to come back to later. And I use local storage to save the user's color palettes. So if the user closes the browser and comes back to it, they should be able to see their saved palettes. However, in the future, I would like to build out my own API to store the color palettes in a JSON file. So when a palette is saved, the user is redirected to their color palette library. And I dynamically update the color palettes so that the most recent one is displayed at the top. And the drop-down menu is also updated with the new palette title so the user can easily navigate to a specific color palette just by clicking on the title in that drop-down menu. The user can also delete or edit their color palette right from the library page. And if the user clicks on the Check Palette Accessibility button, the selected palette is then loaded onto a new page. And this is where I implemented the API. It's a color contrast checker API. So I decided to include this because I think it's really important for web designers to think about accessibility so that the website is easy for all folks to navigate, including people that might have some color blindness or sight loss. So the way this works is that two colors are able to be selected and then sent to the API, and the user will then receive the results back to see if their colors passed the color contrast ratio check or not. So the API determines the degree of contrast between the two colors. And the results are then updated and the results box is styled dynamically. All right. So I also included a hamburger menu to make the design responsive and user-friendly at smaller screen sizes. And here you can see this is what it looks like when it is opened up. Thank you all so much for your time. If you'd like to contact me, here's my information, or if you want to learn a little bit more about the code, here's my GitHub. And as I am about to move abroad, the best way to get in touch with me will either be through email or through LinkedIn. Thank you all so much.
What a fun and useful project, Allison. I really like it. So I know you do have a background in Spanish, and I'm wondering how that sort of lends itself to learning to code.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of similarities between learning foreign languages and learning programming languages. What was helpful for me was to first kind of get a general sense of the language. So learning the syntax. And this can apply to like grammar structures in a spoken language or the syntax of a programming language. And then I also noticed a lot of parallels between verbs and methods and functions because it kind of represents like a change of state. And so when I'm learning a foreign language, at the beginning, I try to learn, say, like 20 of the most common verbs. And as I was learning JavaScript, it was helpful to start learning the most common array methods or string methods to just give yourself the building blocks. And then I would say trying to put that to the side and just jump into it. I think it's super important when learning a language to get out there and have conversations and mess up and be embarrassed and learn from it. And then in the same way, I think that motivated me to start practicing with code almost from day one, even when I just knew how to make a div, really. But just starting from the very beginning and having contact with the language every day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Just a reminder that if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. But we will move on to Chris Habik, who is also in Louisville. Chris, if you want to go ahead and take over.
Hey, Chris, you're on mute still.
Oh, yeah. Still muted, looks like. There you go.
Got it?
Yep, now I can hear you.
All right, start again. Hi, I'm Chris Havoc. I'm excited to be here. I'm from Louisville. I have a Bachelor of Science from the University of Kentucky in Plant and Soil Science. After that, I graduated. I worked 11 years at Valhalla Golf Club here in Louisville, and I've spent the last 11 years and currently in the lawn care industry. Last couple years, I decided to switch careers and try to get into coding, see get my foot in the door somewhere. So started on free code camp, get a certification, and then just completed my web development certification here at Code U. I was looking to gain as much skill and experience as possible, and these are some of the skills I learned while at Code U. The ones I would like to point out the most would be Node and Express. I built my own backend for this project and having to watch a lot of YouTube videos and like implement my code after like the third time of understanding it. It took a while. And just learning how to create my own API routes. Didn't know it was possible. It seemed hard, but as soon as I did it, it was easy. And just learning how the front end and the back end communicate was huge. Some soft skills, like just technical communication, like trying to figure out bugs, how to explain bugs to mentors, try to understand what mentors are telling me, that kind of thing. And then just how to handle problems, breaking a problem down into smaller problems made it a lot easier to fix things. So like I mentioned, I'm in the lawn care business, and one of the problems we have is we have some young 21-year-olds that don't know the math. It's a lot of math when you're mixing up chemicals. It can be if you mix up something wrong and you go out at the wrong rate of a chemical, you end up killing a bunch of yards, and that can be very costly. So I've tried to figure out how I could simplify that process. So I came up with this app called the Chem Mixer Pro. It's the name I came up for it. And here we're going to have a video. And it's a simple screen. It's made for mobile phones and tablets that have out in the field as you're mixing up. But as you can see, you have three inputs. These are presets that I have saved on the back end in a JSON file. The user just enters their water volume, selects which treatment they want, and it instantly displays the results for them, showing how much area they're going to be treating each chemical for that mix, its rate, and how much you will be adding to your tank to mix up. Once you click Save Mix, it saves it to the back end in a JSON file. And then you can go up to Past Mixes, and it'll display every past mix that I have tested out so far for this project. It's got the dates, the time, so you know when things were mixed, all your treatments. It's just categorized, show you how much chemicals you use of everything. When you go to the bottom, it shows your total square feet, just keeps running totals of all your chemicals, all your water, so you can double check the water bill. It's good for keeping track of inventory and just ordering new chemicals. And then for the third-party API, we're going to search for Roundup here using the Environmental Protection Agency's RESTful API. And I have it pull up some label cards for every Roundup label they have in their database. And it's going to come up with a ton of label cards, but I just going to show you a few here. Just had to pull up a little bit of information, just some if it's active or not, signal words, and that kind of thing. So. But that's pretty much the simplicity of ChemMixer Pro right there. Some future things I didn't have time that I want to work on is some user authentication so we can keep track of who's mixing what so we can have accountability. I'm currently teaching myself some React, so I would like to make some user interface upgrades. I found that to be a challenge. I'm an artistic person. I thought I'd be able to do that. But I would like to really work on that. And then just this could be a real world application, I think. I think other companies could use this tool and just trying to figure out how I can make that happen. Some things I feel like I bring to the table, just a strong work ethic, able to see things through, persevere, adaptability, like I've never coded before. teaching myself. So just getting comfortable in a developer environment and working under pressure. It's very hard. My favorite saying from this cohort has been get comfortable being uncomfortable, and I've definitely learned that. And it's definitely makes it rewarding when you come out on the other side of it. So, and just having a good attitude and showing up ready to learn and not getting too frustrated when you run into bugs. And I enjoy coding and I'm excited to keep building. So I want to thank you all for your time. And here's my contact info. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Chris. I think it's really great that you were able to create something that you can actually work and use in the real world. So how will your experience with creating apps for the workplace prepare you for that next role or project?
You know, just being able to identify problems and trying to find a solution using code. I mean, everything I've done so far has been new to me. So I feel like just learning how to adapt and learn quickly and just applying that same mindset to any role or project that comes my way.
Yeah, I think that's a great attitude to have. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Next up, we have James or Jim Kernicki from Berea presenting his project. You ready, James or Jim?
Yes, I am. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Hello?
I can.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I muted myself.
All
I
right,
can
that's
see.
all right. All right. So, hello, my name's Jim Kernicki. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I have a background in inventory management, but for a number of years, I ran a pet service business until moving to Kentucky in late 2024. I built a website for that business, which is how I got interested in web design, web development. And after moving to Kentucky, I started job hunting, and that's when I found out about CodeU and their coding program. So I knew that getting into a coding program would strengthen my coding skills, which it definitely did, and would help me connect with other people in tech. So I thought it was a great opportunity. So my project is called Vision Grid, and it came from my interest in photography. I thought if I could attach notes to images, then it could be used as a project and goal planning tool. At a high level, users can search for images for their project using the Unsplash API, save the images that match their goal, and attach notes to each image. That feature makes it good for practical projects like planning a deck build, basement redo, or landscaping. But a second major feature is the ability to add a goal or affirmation statement for each saved image, and then view those statements in an image slider, which I'll show at the end. And that's ideal for personal goals. So here's the tech I used, and I just wanted to cover some of the things I did. So I ran some reports and ended up having some issues. So I added a lot of accessibility attributes to various elements that I had, mostly my hidden elements. Of course, I used semantic HTML tags. I had to add a lot of SEO tags into the head element as well. And for CSS, I went to push myself and either use things that I haven't used before or use some new features. So I use CSS nesting for the first time, and I love it. I'm going to use that going forward. Use the clamp function for the first time for responsive sizing on my H1. And of course, I use mobile first media queries. For JavaScript, I use it's vanilla JavaScript, but my code started growing large, so I had to use ES modules and break the code into different folders and files. Event delegation, I had a lot of that because most of my elements are dynamic, and I relied heavily on local storage for all the user images and all and text notes. The backend is a standard setup. I have Node.js mainly for environment variables and to support Express.js. And of course, I used Express to hide my API key from front-end code and to serve up the static files. So now this is, I'll show you a demo of my project. So here's the search page. So you would want to search for whatever it is that relates to your goal. And what comes back is 12 images, which I place in image cards. And you do have save or remove buttons, which you can do that from the page here, but it really makes more sense to view the image if you click on it in a modal, so you can see the full aspect ratio. And then you can navigate between, and then also opt to either save or remove from this view. And of course, if you can continue searching to retrieve 12 more images until you have all the saved images that you're looking for your project. But the important page is your project board page, where your saved images, it's a 50-50 split, your image and a text field where you can add notes pertaining to whatever your goal or project is. And as soon as you click out of here, they're saved to local storage. If you click on an image, that's where you can add an affirmation statement or a goal statement, which will be used in the image slider. And you could also navigate through this page for that purpose as well. And then I do have, oh yeah, the thumbnail strip is useful for reorganizing your images, so you can have, like images together. Clicking on the thumbnail takes you to that image on the page. And you also have, if you want, you can delete any saved images in case you don't need them anymore. And that's removed from the page, the thumbnail strip, and from local storage. And then finally is the settings screen, where you can personalize the title there if you want. It's a little feature. Set the timing for the image slider, and then click the start slider button to start the show, and then it'll infinitely scroll through all your images and show your goal statement or your affirmation statement. And it'll end when you close the modal. And then I do have an about page which explains in more detail what I just said, and has some tips and tricks, additional tips and tricks that I have for the user. So that is the demo. Let me see if I can. Having a little trouble here advancing here. Okay. Oh, there you go. I'm sorry. Okay, so the challenge I had was, well, it wasn't saving the user's text notes. I was able to use that, but when I recalled them from local storage, if there was line breaks, they weren't preserved. So everything flowed together on the same line. Long story short, I had to eventually ask ChatGPT, and it told me I had to use inner HTML to preserve those breaks, which was disappointing. I didn't want to use inner HTML, but everything's stored to local storage, so it should be fine. It would be a problem if I ended up using a database for this. And to understand the flow of my project, I ended up recreating every possible user action. And I put console logs and console trace in all my functions. And I realized that after doing everything that a user does, if I could have visualized that in the beginning, I could have wrote pseudocode. And I think my code organization would end up being a lot better. So that's definitely something I want to do in the future. But that would have saved me time. But that's my project. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about my project or would like to connect. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jim. Great job. So what new things did you learn about coding or yourself as a result of completing your project?
I learned a lot of things on this project. One of the things was tied to all the accessibility issues and errors I was getting. And it made me think how users interact with the UI. So I did things like I ran tests and reports with like the Wave browser extension or Lighthouse reports. And that's what showed me a lot of problems I was having with my hidden elements and with keyboard focus. And I took a deep dive into learning area attributes, which was not something I was real familiar with. So that was great. So in the future, I definitely want to design and develop my project with that in mind, so that I don't have to do cleanup at the end, and that making sure to test, which is vital for making sure your app is accessible. So big learning curve on a lot of things, but that was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, that sounds like you learned quite a bit. Good plan for moving forward. Thanks, Jim.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Next up, it looks like we have Brittany Roberts from Louisville. Brittany, are you ready to go?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
And I can see your screen. Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Roberts. A little bit about me is I was a D1 track and field athlete at the University of Washington, and for the past 9 years, I've worked as a network operations analyst where I collect, analyze, and interpret carrier performance data to identify
Hey,
trends.
Brittany,
Yes.
I think your screen stopped sharing.
Yes, I was going to say something, but I wasn't sure if it was just me.
Okay.
There you are. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I joined CoView to build new skills that support my long-term career growth and will help me contribute more effectively in a data-focused role. My project analyzes how track and field jump performance has evolved from youth to elite levels. The data was sourced from worldathletics.org, all-time top list for men and women in long jump, triple jump, and high jump for the age categories U18, high school level, U20, university and college, and senior, which is professional or Olympic level. The venue elevation data was sourced using ChatGPT. The tools I used were VS Code and Git to organize and track the entire workflow, SQLite 3 to store and structure the data, Beautiful Soup to collect the raw data, Python and Pandas to clean and prepare the data, Jupyter, Seaborn, and Matplotlib to explore and visualize the results. This project explored the athlete development trends of track and field jumpers from U18 to senior level. The goal is to eventually apply principles similar to predictive modeling used in healthcare to athletic performance. One challenge I faced was finding a data set that both met the project rubric and allowed me to explore meaningful questions. I ran into issues when sourcing elevation data for the venues, such as formatting and missing contextual data, which was overcome using ChatGPT. One of the biggest challenges was overcoming my tendency to hyper-focus on small details, like perfecting scripts during the cleaning phase. I overcame that challenge by applying agile mindset to the remaining task and working in goal-oriented sprints. To overcome the challenge of finding a data set, I wrote a function to scrape historical track and field results directly from World Athletics. For each event-specific URL request, the HTML tables are parsed into structured data, and the results are saved as raw CSV files. This process allowed the project to scale across events, genders, and age categories while maintaining consistency and data quality. If you'd like to discuss this project, the methods I used, or how these skills could translate to your team, I'd be happy to connect and answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Great job. And I know that you've had experience in data analytics before you came into this program. What are a couple of skills or techniques that you've learned while in CodeU that will help you in that career path?
I was able to deepen my skills in Python and SQL while gaining more confidence in structuring analysis and working through real world data problems.
That's awesome. Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks, Brittany. Next up, we have Knox Shake, who's in Louisville. I think they're ready. Are you ready to share your project, Knox?
Yep, give me half a second actively getting the screen up. if it'll start the slideshow. All right.
All right, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raina Sheikh, although I do prefer to go primarily by Knox. And today I am going to be presenting my outbreak and recall data analyst. Some info about me. I was born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky, and now live in Nicholasville, just south of Lexington. I have a diverse background in both customer service and in healthcare. And I joined CodeU because I had wanted to learn code to advance my career, but I had no idea where to even begin going about doing so. A coworker of mine recommended the program to me, and I cannot stress how glad I am I took her advice because this has been an amazing opportunity. As I learned, I realized data analytics was what caught my attention the most, which is what leads us to here and now. My project was focused on foodborne disease outbreaks and food recalls. What ultimately led to me deciding to do this was when I was in the process of deciding what I wanted to do my project on, I had heard talks of the FDA and the CDC potentially being defunded around the same time as one of the more notorious food recalls of recent months, namely the radioactive shrimp recall. Food safety is extremely important as the CDC estimates that around 48 million Americans get sick with a foodborne illness every year. That's around 1 in every 6 people. The results recalls done by the FDA are done to reduce the amount of harm done to our population, and in the case of food recalls, that does include harm done by foodborne illnesses. My goal was to see if I could find any potential correlation between FDA food recalls and foodborne disease outbreaks reported by the CDC. My thoughts were that if I could find potential correlations between the two, it could be used as a justification to not defund these two extremely important organizations. My data sources for this project were the CDC National Outbreak Reporting System, otherwise known as NORS dataset, as well as the FDA Food Recall Enforcement API. Both are publicly available, and I've included the links to both on this slide if anybody is interested. I'm going to start out by showing some of the visualizations from my project. This one was a bar chart showing what 10 foodborne diseases had the most reported outbreaks. And I found it interesting that while Salmonella had the highest total outbreak count, almost half of the diseases ranked in the top 10 were some variety of norovirus. Here we have a chart showing the number of reported foodborne illnesses each year. And what I find interesting here is that while the numbers typically stayed within the same range, in 2020 there was a sharp decrease in how many reported foodborne disease outbreaks there were. While I originally would have thought that it was because that was when the pandemic first started going in full swing, that doesn't make sense upon further thought, as we were all in quarantine. And since this data is solely focused on foodborne disease outbreaks, that wouldn't have had much of an effect beyond there being less people eating in public places. The values did start going back to normal after that, but it was something I found interesting and would like to look into later on. Here we have another chart showing the number of FDA food recalls per year. Our numbers are pretty even up until 2011, where they go up, and ever since 2016, they have gradually been going down. We do seem to have the occasional spike in numbers, but overall, they have gradually been decreasing since the numbers we had in 2016. This is one of the later charts I made in the project, and it shows the percentage of what diseases were involved in the cases where I did find potential correlations between a recall and an outbreak. Originally, I had thought that norovirus would have had the highest percentage, as almost half of the top 10 most frequent foodborne disease outbreaks were some type of norovirus. But this was not the case, as slightly over 82% of the cases with possible correlations between a recall and an outbreak involved salmonella. I had several challenges going into this project, most of which I had already been anticipating. These were both very large data sets with tens of thousands of rows each, and as such, it took a lot of time and effort to clean my data. Additionally, I had multiple columns where the data values were inconsistent, with one example being a column in my NORS dataset, where looking at it initially, you would expect all of the values to either be confirmed or suspected, and instead I had several rows where the value was some combination of the two. And I had to be very careful in how I ultimately fixed those values. The solution to getting everything cleaned in time for me to do a proper analyst was by getting so into the groove of coding that I ended up hyper-focusing for 48 hours straight on fixing the worst of the inconsistencies. To start out with, I had to gather my data. The NORS dataset was pretty easy as I was able to just download the CSV file from the site, but the recall data was a bit trickier. I ultimately created a function to pull the data from the API and turn it into a CSV that I could work with from there. And you can see a line from that function where I used the time.sleep function to ensure that I wouldn't accidentally hit the request per minute limit by adding a short pause between those requests. As I mentioned earlier, there was a great deal of data cleaning involved in this project. For one, I had to standardize the date format so that I could later join both data sets on the dates. I also had a large number of inconsistent values, and you can see here part of a function I made to handle that. I had made a list of rules in order to correct and standardize values to the best of my abilities, and this part of the function ensured that once a value in that column had been corrected, the function couldn't edit it again. And it even standardized the values that didn't fall under my rule list by giving them a general label of other. From there, I used SQLite to normalize the data from both my data sets into relational tables so I could begin analyzing and visualizing. I will admit that there were limitations to my project. For one, my data is highly reliant on what was reported. There's always going to be the chance that a recall wasn't input into the API correctly or that an outbreak didn't get reported. There were also constraints about in gathering the data from the API. With the function I wrote, I was only able to gather around 26,000 rows due to the limitations within the API. And I know there was more data within the API that I wasn't able to gather with my function alone. The final limitation to this project was that this project was focused entirely on correlation. While I would have loved to have find some type of causation and get a definitive answer, I knew there was no way to do so. And we all know the phrase correlation does not equal causation. With that, this is the end of my presentation for you all today. Here are the links to my profiles on other platforms in case you guys are interested in anything else I've worked on. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
That was such interesting information, Knox. I love it. So I know that you've had roles in customer service. And how have those roles prepared you for a role in data analytics?
Yeah, so working in customer service taught me a lot about how to recognize patterns such as busy periods, common issues, how customer flow tends to work. And that knowledge helped me learn to make operations run a bit more smoothly. I use this awareness to prioritize tasks, improve efficiency, help support team coordination, and all of these can directly relate to analyzing data to identify trends and insights. These roles also strengthen my attention to detail, and I can communicate clearly in fast-paced environments due to this.
Yeah, definitely tons of transferable skills. Thanks again, Knox.
Thanks, Knox. All right, next up we have Jessica Long, who is coming to us from Corbin, Kentucky, as one of our SOAR participants. All right, I can see your screen,
Okay.
Jessica. Take it
Trying
away.
it now, not on mute. Hi, thank you for the introduction. My project today is titled The Geography of Loss. I basically use Park Service data to explore mortality and risk in public lands. At a really high level, the project asks a pretty simple question. What can the data tell us about the risk? My name is Jessica Long. I'm a registered nurse with a background in emergency care, a wilderness first responder, and an Army veteran. More recently, I've been working in technical consulting and data workflows, and I'm actively pursuing purpose-driven data roles where analysis informs decisions. I'd love to help people and systems be safer and smarter. I'm based in Corbin, Kentucky, and I'm open to remote, hybrid, or in-person work. Because of my professional experience, I have spent a lot of time thinking about what happens when people get hurt in places where help is limited or delayed. When choosing a project, I gravitated towards data sets that could help look at these risks through a different lens than just providing emergency care after the fact. I started with the National Park Service's mortality data set, which documents all known fatal incidents from 2007 to 2024. Each record includes some basic information like date, time, location, cause, and demographics, and it covers all of the park units. So that includes historic sites, monuments, scenic rivers, essentially anywhere where somebody is standing in front of a brown sign with that arrowhead and they're thinking, yeah, it's hot, and yeah, I'm wearing flip-flops, but my water bottle is almost full, so it's probably going to be okay. After I cleaned that data set, I started with some exploratory analysis to understand what I was really working with. I found that the fatalities skewed heavily male, they trend older, and they most commonly involve drowning and car crashes. None of that was surprising, and the patterns align with what we see in other public safety data. So that helped validate the accuracy of the data set and understand what questions I should really be asking to dig into the risk behind the events. To understand the incidents at a deeper level, I needed more context. Based on the Park Service documentation, I expected all the data to be structured really simply. One park unit equals one four-letter park code that's used consistently everywhere. Spoiler alert, the data was not structured simply. In reality, a single park unit often maps to multiple codes depending on the data set. That made reliable joins impossible, and in some cases, it limited what data I could even retrieve because the APIs were looking for specific unit codes. At that point, this really stopped being a cleaning problem and it became a systems problem. So I had to take a huge step back and rebuild the foundation. I ultimately combined 8 separate Park Service datasets using APIs, downloadable files, and web scraping to construct a consistent, complete park unit key. Along the way, I added roughly 200,000 additional records that provide operational, environmental, and geographic context for each incident. This is the resulting SQL ERD, which is really the backbone of my whole project. At the center is a fact table with mortality incidents, and around it are dimension tables for park units, dates, causes, activities, demographics, and so on. I designed the structure to clearly separate what happened from where, when, and under what conditions it happened. That makes it easier to ask new questions or add new information over time without reworking the whole pipeline. I built this really intentionally to be a well-structured data warehouse and not just a one-off setup to answer a single question. When the database was designed, I wanted to determine the mortality rates normalized for visitation so that I could distinguish high-volume parks from high-risk parks. Raw counts didn't really work because the visitation varies so wildly. You have parks like Great Smoky Mountains, pictured here, which sees over 12 million visitors a year. And then you have places like Gates of the Arctic in Alaska that sees fewer than 12,000 visitors a year. So in a park with that level of traffic, a single fatal incident can make the risk look enormous, even if it was just a one-off freak event. To deal with that, I used an empirical Bayes approach to calculate a credible mortality rate per million visitors. In practical terms, that method asks how much information do we actually have before we decide something's risky. It tempers those extreme values when the data is sparse, but it still preserves the meaningful differences. And this chart shows the parks with the highest credible mortality rates per million visitors. The dashed line marks the system-wide baseline, which is 1 death per million visitors. And just for some context, if you look at the US population over the same time period, the average mortality rate's about 8,000 deaths per million people. So even the most dangerous parks in this data set are, statistically speaking, still orders of magnitude safer than daily life. But what really matters here is that the credibility adjustment did not erase the outliers. Even after accounting for visitation, some parks still stand out by a lot. Risk is not evenly distributed across the park system, and the credible rate helps surface where the variation is real and worth understanding better. When I calculated the credible rate for all of the parks, I used Folium to build this interactive map. What you're seeing here is a screen recording, but the actual output is an HTML file that users can explore on their own. You can zoom, pan, hover over parks to see details like the park name, the mortality rate, and the data completeness. And you can customize those pop-ups depending on the audience. Being able to move through the geography of loss this way makes the patterns feel more intuitive, and it naturally points to better follow-up questions. So from here, I have continued exploring relationships between the mortality rates and the park risks, but I don't have time to go deeper into that today. If this project sparked your curiosity, I would genuinely love to talk about it more. The QR code on the left goes to the full project on GitHub, and the one on the right goes to my LinkedIn profile. And you can just take a quick screenshot or a picture with your phone and save them if you want to connect. Um, Thank you all so much for your time today, and especially thank you to Code U for the opportunity to share my work.
Really cool project, Jessica.
Thank
Can
you.
you give an example of how your clinical background helped you to ask better questions of the data?
Yeah. So I've only ever worked in emergency care, and a big part of that job is walking into situations where everything is chaotic. Sometimes you have somebody that's found down, nobody knows what happened, the patient can't tell you, and you can't just jump to a diagnosis. You have to start with, what do I know? What do I not know? What might be misleading me? And you have to be very systematic because the stakes are high. You have to adapt as your information changes. And what Code You really helped me understand is realize that I already think in a way that works for data. I didn't have the tools or the language, but the program taught me how to translate that thinking into code. So now, as a data analyst, that shows up asking better questions. Not just what does the data set say, but just like that patient, what do I actually know? What do I not know yet? What could be misleading me? And what's the right way to frame the problem before I start?
Those are some really great points, Jessica. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Our last presenter, but definitely not least, we have Julie Gamble. And Julie is also coming to us from Louisville.
Actually, I'm from Ashland, Kentucky.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have
No, that's completely
not
fine.
matched that up. Oh, you are. I see you're in SOAR now. That's my fault. I think I was looking at the wrong spreadsheet. Thanks for
It's okay.
correcting me. Go ahead.
Um, Thank you for allowing me to present today. My name is Julie Gamble, and again, I'm located in Ashland, Kentucky. I've recently completed the data analysis pathway with CodeU. I think my screen is messing up. Can you see okay?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can see it, but if you're moving to the next slide, it's stuck there. But if you're on the
I
first one,
didn't.
you're good.
No, I
Okay.
just
Yeah.
glitched on my screen then. Okay, sorry.
Cool. We're good. No, you're
After
fine.
17 years in retail management, my most recent position was eliminated in March of last year, leading to the need to change careers. I've always had an interest in problem solving and storytelling, and data analysis is a great way to do just that. I did my project on wastewater dumping and seismic activity with a focus on the Appalachian Basin region and the Oklahoma region. In this project, I analyzed the relationship between wastewater dumping and seismic events in the Oklahoma region. I also compared the seismic events in Oklahoma to the seismic events in the Appalachian Basin region. In recent years, both the Appalachian Basin and Oklahoma regions have experienced significant increases in seismic activity. A growing body of research suggests that the rise may be linked to wastewater injection, a common byproduct of hydraulic fracturing or fracking. This may increase the magnitude and depth of seismic events. Understanding this relationship is critical for assessing environmental risks and developing strategies to minimize human-induced seismic events. To get started on this project, I utilized 3 datasets: the earthquake CSV from the Appalachian Basin Play Fairway Analysis, Gravity, Magnetics, and Earthquake data located on data.gov. This dataset featured over 1,600 rows and 12 columns. The OK Quake CSV and Injection Wells CSV from Oklahoma earthquakes and saltwater injection wells located on Kaggle.com. The OK Quake CSV featured over 13,900 rows and 22 columns. The Injection Wells CSV featured over 11,100 rows and 21 columns. To use these datasets properly, I relied on specific programs for data analysis and visualization. I used Jupyter Notebooks with Python, Pandas, and NumPy for data cleaning and analysis, and I used SQLite 3 for my database and queries. I used Matplotlib to help visualize the data, like this graph on the right, showing the majority of seismic events in 2013 occurred in West Virginia. I also utilized Seaborn, Plotly, and Plotly Express and GeoPandas to showcase meaningful and accurate visualizations. But first, I needed to make sure the data was ready for analysis. I arranged each dataset into its own Jupyter notebook for easier organization. I then went through each dataset individually and prepared the data for analysis by renaming columns to a common name amongst the two earthquake datasets for easier merging of SQL tables. For example, in the top image, unnecessary capital letters and underscores were removed. I dropped columns that were not going to be used for this analysis and/or had too much missing information, as seen in the bottom image. The remaining null values were identified and removed or replaced. I created a function to split the date-time column, correct the data type to date-time, and the function also adds month and year columns and moves all the new date columns to the front of the column list for easy access. I also needed to reformat the locations from a description to a specific state location. This was one of my biggest challenges because I needed to reformat over 15,500 values. I utilized ChatGPT to assist in prepping the values for reformatting by adding quotations and commas after the values so that I could easily and quickly add them to a list. The bottom right graphic is an example of the descriptive locations that were reformatted to just the state locations. After cleaning the data, I began some visualizations and set up my SQL database. To set up my database, I created an ER diagram for my tables. Because of the way the data was listed, I needed to make two separate diagrams. I organized the columns from the Oklahoma and Appalachian region earthquake datasets into one section, and the injection well columns into a separate section. I ran the tables separately with SQL queries. However, they could be joined on latitude and longitude if necessary. Instead, I used GeoPandas to overlap visualizations from the separate queries. First, looking at the state of Oklahoma data, I used a SQL query to pull the injection well approvals from 2000 to 2016 and grouped by year to see the change in well approvals, which resulted in an increase. For the diagram, I used the result of the query of injection wells where I joined two tables on a primary key to have well locations and well order information. I also specified between 2010 and 2016 to show the locations of approved wells during that time period. Using GeoPandas, I created an interactive map on the injection well sites in the state of Oklahoma. You can zoom in or out and hover over blue point for the specific well ID, not shown here. I used the same process as before to compare the locations of the injection well sites to the seismic event locations for the same time period between 2010 and 2016. First, a SQL query of the event locations joined with the event dates, then utilizing GeoPandas to produce the interactive map of seismic events. Hovering over one of the red points would show the specific event ID. This process showed me that there were more seismic events and injection wells located in the center of the state, but I wanted to know more about the seismic activity specifically, so I went back to the data. Using the Oklahoma earthquakes dataset, I grouped the seismic events into each year and saved to a variable. Then I called that variable into a plot to display the information. And what I saw was a dramatic change. This visualization shows a consistent average of 24 seismic events per year for 36 years. Then in 2015, the faults began to slip with the increased volume of wastewater and produced 4,576 seismic events in 2015. I then wanted to compare this graph to the seismic events in the Appalachian region. Using the Appalachian region dataset, I recreated the process. I created a variable, then called it to the plot, and the data produced a very similar graph to the Oklahoma region. The data shows an average of 18 events per year and spiking to 580 seismic events in 2013. I also looked at the magnitude of seismic events and the depth of those events for each region. But we are out of time today. If you would like to see more of my project, please feel free to reach out to me directly or view the project on my GitHub. Thank you everyone for joining today. Again, my name is Julie Gamble and I can be reached at the contact information below.
Great job, Julie. I'm wondering if you were to go back and redo your project completely, what changes would you make?
I had to think about this one a lot, and what I came up with was I would add another data set from a different geographical region, maybe one that doesn't have many wastewater injection wells, to see how the data would compare to the regions that do, and if there's any differences or similarities to the trends in seismic activity for them.
That's a great idea. Thanks a lot, Julie.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Everybody did a really great job presenting really cool projects. Um, Please feel free to put any additional questions in the chat and I'll try and circle back to those. But otherwise, just wanted to say thank you all for attending and supporting our program as always. We will have a recording of this these presentations available, and it'll be on our YouTube channel soon. If anyone is interested in talking more to these graduates or seeing their resumes, we do have those available, and we can give you all a link to viewing their LinkedIn and our graduate database. And our next demo day, the date hasn't been set yet, but will likely be in the late spring. So keep an eye out for events around those. For our employers on the call, we do have our first ever employer showcase event coming up at the end of February. So if you haven't heard from me about that, this is, the participants will also be able to attend that program, but we're in the process of planning that event. So if you're an employer and you'd like to participate in an employer showcase where you get to talk for a few minutes about your role and the technologies you use, kind of reverse demo day, please reach out to me if you haven't heard from me already. My email is ally@codeu.com. It should be or .org. It should be a great event. If nobody has any additional questions, I think we can go ahead and call it. Again, thank you all for attending, and thanks to all of our presenters for doing such an awesome job. All right. Thank you all.